Welcome guys, it's day 6 now. Yesterday I talked a bit about micronutrients on a plant-based diet, and today I thought I'd go into B12 in a little bit more detail, because that's certainly one that comes up. People will often ask the question, oh, but if we're plant eaters, why do we need to supplement B12? Which is kind of a ridiculous question, because there's plenty of non-vegans that take all kinds of supplements in order to be healthy. So I don't think that's a valid argument against veganism necessarily, but I just thought I'd go into that in a little bit more depth. So who does need B12? Is it just vegans that need to supplement? Well, actually, we all need B12, and most of us are deficient. And the reason for that is, well, first of all, let's talk about what is B12. B12 is a nutrient. It helps to keep the body's nerves and blood cells healthy, and it also helps to make the DNA. So if you're not getting enough, you could potentially be at risk of things like anemia or walking around missing bits of your DNA, I guess. So it's kind of important. And the complication with B12 is that it's a little bit tricky to absorb. There's a 2-step process, and it relies on things like there being enough cobalt in the soil for there to be enough B12 in the food source, and then you need to have strong enough hydrochloric acid to be able to break it apart, and then you need to be able to absorb it in your intestine and convert it into the active form. And not everyone is able to do all of those parts for different reasons, and so a lot of people can be B12 deficient as a result. So where does B12 come from? A lot of people think because it's sort of such a big thing in the vegan world that it only comes from animal tissue or from their secretions like milk and cheese and eggs. But actually B12 is made by microbes. Microbes are the only organism on earth that can make B12. Fungi, plants, animals can't make B12. The microbes make it, and the microbes are in the dirt and the soil, and they're also in the gut. So animals like cows, for example, they make their own B12. They've got huge amounts of microbes in their foregut. They're foregut fermenters, and so that's how they synthesize it. And if there's adequate levels of cobalt in the soil, then usually they can synthesize enough and they disperse it through their tissue because it's needed by almost every cell. Hindgut fermenters, so that's like rabbits, they make it in the hindgut, and then it comes out in their stool, and that's one of the reasons why animals like rabbits and hares eat some of their stool. It's to help them get the B12 that then gets absorbed up in the small intestine. It doesn't get absorbed in the hindgut. And that's actually what humans do as well. So the microbes in our hindgut that are responsible for fermenting our species-appropriate plant-based diet, they make the B12. But because it's too far down, it comes out in our stool. It's not getting absorbed up in the small intestine, which is where it needs to be. And so naturally, we would get B12 if we were eating plants taken from the dirt that were grown in cobalt-rich soils, because the cobalt's necessary for the microbes to be able to make the B12 in the first place. And then we ate the vegetables or the greens or whatever we'd pulled out of the soil without washing them. And so because we live in such an unnatural society these days, the soils are really deficient in most minerals. A lot of our food gets sanitized before it even gets to our mouths, and then a lot of people have different levels of disease as well. So they may be undermethylators, or they might not have very strong stomach acid, or they might have poor gut health. And so there's all of these levels at which there can be a deficiency as a result. And so a deficiency is not something that's going to show up immediately. It takes some time for symptoms to develop, and so you can be B12 deficient and be plodding along quite happily and then potentially end up in a coma. So it's something that you want to probably be paying attention to. So animals are basically a secondary source of a B12 supplement. The other problem these days we have is a lot of the animals that are farmed in really unnatural environments, high intensive environments, and so they're not actually getting access to the soil where the microbes produce the B12 in the first place, and so they're given a B12 supplement in their food source, and it's the synthetic B12 supplement that ends up in their animal tissues or their secretions. And so when you're eating animal tissue or milk or eggs, you're actually just eating a B12 supplement. You're not getting necessarily the natural B12. And so it's a void argument, that whole, oh, but if we're plant eaters, why do we need to supplement? You're all supplementing anyway by eating the animal tissue. It's just an indirect way of getting it. So personally, I'd rather just take a B12 supplement that's easily produced by bacterial fermentation rather than consuming an animal product that along with that comes hormones, antibiotics, toxic compounds that makes your body acidic, saturated fat, cholesterol, not enough fiber, produces toxic compounds in your body when you break it down, which potentially contributes to diseases like kidney problems, gallbladder issues, arthritis, cancer, the whole long list of cardiac disease, diabetes, etc., etc. All of those lifestyle diseases that we're seeing more and more these days. So in summary, I think it's unreasonable to suggest that our natural diet, the diet that we're designed to eat, is necessarily going to meet all of our needs these days when food isn't what it used to be. We're not living in our natural environment anymore. Most of us live in houses with walls and roofs, and we wash our clothes daily, and we wash our bath towels, and we clean our houses regularly, and we vacuum, and we do all of those things that when you sort of think about us as an animal, you know, we're doing a lot of things that's eliminating a lot of the sort of microbial, natural microbes from our existence. And so we're not living a natural life, so it's unreasonable to expect that eating a natural diet is necessarily going to give you everything you need. And a lot of people are living with different levels of diseases as well, so that's a whole other thing to consider. So yeah, in summary, it's still going to be better for your health and your longevity to consider moving more towards a plant-based diet, and definitely, if you're vegan, look at your B12 levels and look at supplementation. But even if you're not vegan, you should still be getting your B12 levels checked and considering supplementation if they're getting on the low side. And so these are the kinds of supplements that we use. So the kids use this little B12 spray. They get a little spray of that on the tongue every day, or as often as I remember. So that one's 500 micrograms. So they don't need that every day. Every second or every third day would be enough. I take a 2000 microgram B12 supplement once or twice a week, and I use the methylcobalamin. So that it's more easily absorbed from what I have read than the cyclobalamin, I think it's pronounced, which takes a little bit more converting to be able to be utilised. But if you're an undermethylator, or if you've got poor gut health, or there's any reason why taking an oral supplement isn't going to work for you, then you can get injections. So go to your doctor. I did this initially when my gut health wasn't that great. Before I started using oral supplements, I was using an injectable version, and it's just a matter of doing a little intramuscular injection. You get the stuff from the chemist, and then as long as you're okay giving needles or someone else can do it for you, it's an easy thing to do, it doesn't hurt. So yeah, they're the different ways of getting your B12, and certainly don't use it as an excuse. Don't let it put you off eating a vegan diet, because it's not a valid argument. It's very easy to get a synthetic version, and it's going to be way healthier for you to do it that way.